Welcome back to the course with WooCommerce and React. In the last video, we covered the shopping cart page and the shop page. In this video, we're going to cover the checkout page, and here we're going to finish the transaction. We're going to make a call to the Stripe API and get a successful message. And once that message reaches us, we're also going to create an order like this in the WordPress backend, thus finishing the whole transaction and send the user to a success page. So let's get started. All right, so we are back at our checkout page, which is ready with the products. We should also know that from in here, we can just click here to go to edit cart. For example, if we want to add one extra item here, we can do that. Then come back to finish the transaction, right? So at this point, we're going to go ahead and fill up the form. Let's do that. James Bond, the email, then the address, city, state, and the zip code. Now let's fill up this credit card information, and here we're going to use a fake card or test card that's given to us by Stripe. All right, and now we're going to go ahead and add a month and a year and any 3-digit number as a CVC. All right, so now we're ready to go. And what happens is, as soon as I click here, we also go back to here. Here we're running another middleware server, and it's listening on port 4000. And this has been built with Express.js and Node.js. This has nothing to do with React, and I followed the Stripe guidelines to build it. We're going to walk through this, not a problem. But in here, just to make sure that you understand that this is going to listen to whatever we're sending from here and take it to all the way to Stripe and finish the transaction and let us know a success message. Depending on that, we're going to go redirect the user to a success page and create another order here, right? So let's reset that a little bit. Okay, so now let's go finish the transaction. Boom, there you go, success page. And as soon as that happens, you can see we are talking to the WordPress backend, and here's the data from WooCommerce that an order has been created. And let's verify, come here, refresh, and there you go, that's our latest order with all the necessary details and the money amount, etc. And also in here, our listener will display all the information that it just received and whatever it sent to the Stripe account, and send us this success message. And now we're going to verify, go straight to my Stripe account, and right here, the James Bond transaction. So at this point, we can say that our transaction has been successful. So now let's go see how it is done. All right, so this is the checkout page again, and you guys actually noticed how a successful transaction took place. It looked simple enough, but if I go to the code, we will see that it is not actually that simple. Before we dig down to the code, I have decided to show you a diagram. This will help us understand what's happening in the background before we actually go into the nitty-gritty details of the code. So basically what's happening here is, this is where our app is located. This is where the checkout page is, kind of like this in here. See, localhost 3000, so that's our app. And in here, when we look in the code, we will see that in this page, we're going to get the data from the cart context. Now this cart context we described in detail on our last video. We will also go over that a little bit in here, and then we will see that it is bringing in the cart items, total, and the clear cart function straight from that cart context. And once we bring those data in, we'll hand them over to another component called Stripe container. In here, we're going to bring in the stripe.js module. This is something that Stripe gives us to process the data to make it fit with their API. So basically, we're going to get this data and then process them right here and turn them into, let's say, cart item into line item and total into total amount, etc., even though the clear cart function remains the same. Besides processing this data, we will also go through some of the steps where we're going to need our public key from Stripe. So once we process the data, then we hand it over to another component that I built called payment form. In here, we're going to bring in this Stripe React JS module, where we're going to bring in these hooks and components that Stripe gives us, like card element, use elements, and use Stripe. Using those, we're going to build our payment form and integrate this form right here. This one. This is strictly built by following the direction from Stripe API documentation. I mean, basically the whole thing is, but this part is where we have to use this Stripe React JS, card element, etc. And this is the level where we first make contact with our middleware, this guy right here. As mentioned before, this is built with Express and Node.js according to Stripe documentation. In fact, we can just get rid of this and give you a look. I mean, it's not too much, but we'll go over this. Okay, what's happening here though, it is running in a completely different port. As you can see, it's port 4000, and we are creating an endpoint here called payment. So after processing this data and building this form, once we submit this form, it's gonna get some data according to Stripe API and send it to this middleware, specifically this payment endpoint. And once this middleware gets the data, it's gonna do some more processing and send the data straight to the main Stripe API. And once this Stripe API authenticates and processes that payment, basically creates that payment right here, it's going to send us a success message back here, and this guy will let this guy know about the success, and this guy will redirect the client or the user to a success page, thus finishing the transaction. But at the same time, in the same component, we also have a WooCommerce part where we create an order according to the WooCommerce REST API. Once it's confirmed that the transaction succeeded, here I built an order and send it to the WordPress backend where all our WooCommerce products are, so that an official order is registered here, like this. And that's pretty much the whole picture in the background, and that's what happens. So now we'll go to the code and explain step by step, module by module. Once again, guys, fasten your seatbelts. Here we go. All right, guys, we're back at the code. In here, we're mostly going to focus on this cart context and the pages and the Stripe folder, right? Or whatever here is, the payment form, Stripe container, and under the pages, we're going to focus on checkout page, right? But before we get down to that, I just kept this open for you because I must mention this, because this time for the first time, we're going to actually write to the WooCommerce API. So far, what you have seen, we were just reading from the API, so there was no problem, right? But when we create the order at the very end, we actually have to write to the WooCommerce API. And when that happens, CORS kicks in. What is CORS? I'm not going to go into much more detail, but you can find out all about it from here. Cross-origin resource sharing. Basically, the absolute simple explanation is once you try to create something from one URL to another URL, basically what's happening here is that we are using this URL like localhost 3000. This is where our app is, but we're trying to create something here where localhost 10,004, it's a completely different URL. So when that happens, this CORS guy kicks in and stops you, right? And of course, you can just feel free to investigate yourself, learn more, no problem. But the answer is to get that WordPress ready, where your WooCommerce products are, you must put this guy in that functions file. Once you do, only then your writing to the WordPress or creating order will be successful. So this is a must. Please pay careful notice to this and make sure you put that in to that function file in order for the whole things to work. Now, let's get down to business. All right, so we are now at the checkout page. And if you look at this folder, it has two parts, checkout page and checkout success page, right? So we'll get down to that later. And also we have a little bit of a CSS or SAS involved. That's it, right? So, just to make it responsive. Anyway, so let's go back. All right, here what we're doing, we are bringing in use context so that we can actually, use the cart context data, and then link from router DOM, and then page content and all the React Bootstrap. These are just layout components. And then we definitely brought in the cart context and the Stripe container. Stripe container would be this guy here, right? Okay, so let's move on. Now let's focus on the cart context, right? So, and please go back to the previous video where I covered this extensively. So I'm going to be very quick here. So let's go to the cart context and let's see what we're bringing: cart items, total, and clear cart, right? So context here, we have these functions built: add item, add more, add less, remove, etc., clear cart, right there. And in here, including the state, we're sending all this info to the cart context provider as a value, and subsequently this guy trickling it down to all its children. Just a quick preview to the index file here. As you can see, we're bringing in the cart context provider and wrapping the whole app with it. And app is mother of all content, all pages, all components, right? So that's how everybody is getting data from it. So now let's go back. And also, you might be wondering where the total and stuff comes from, right? Let's look at that page again. Checkout page. Okay, so here we're bringing in the total. Clear cart, we know it's coming from the function, but cart items and total, right? Those are the ones we are a little bit confused about. So they are actually coming from state, and state comes from here. Initial state was the cart item, all the cart items we pulled out from the local storage and totaled them up with this function, sum items. For that, we have to go to the reducer function right here. A quick look, sum items, and we're using the JavaScript reduce function to create the item totals, item counts, and the total price, right? So item count and total, these are also coming with the state. So this state is also we are sending with the cart context, right? And from there, in the checkout page, we're bringing in the cart item, total, clear cart. That's it. So now let's get rid of the cart context. Now let's see what's happening. So once we have the data available, then the rest gets a little bit simpler. Okay, so we're bringing in the page, the content, all those layout items to make the page structure, and then I'm breaking it down to a 7-column and 5-column, which is basically 7 and 5. In the larger portion, we're calling the Stripe container. And in this container, we are sending props, the total, the cart item, and the clear cart that we collected from the cart context. And the next would be the smaller part of it, where it's nothing but simple data, the summary, the total, and so on and so forth. I mean, this is nothing big going on here. You just creating, controlling the decimal point too, with two fixed function, JavaScript basic vanilla JavaScript function. And in here we are mapping through the cart items and getting like single products and showing their data in here like one by one like this, just to make sure that the user knows what they're ordering. So this is pretty simple part. I mean, and then the edit cart button, which will take you back to the cart so that you can make changes. So this so far is pretty simple, right? Now, Stripe container. And remember, these are the props, the total, the cart items, and the clear cart. So as we mentioned before, in the Stripe container, we are bringing in the Stripe.js for the first time, and we are going to process the data that we got from the cart context in here, right? So let's go see how we do it. All right, so let's go find our Stripe container. There you go. And here you can see we're bringing in not only the Stripe.js, we're also bringing in Stripe React.js. We're using it very little, just the elements. That's why I did not clutter our diagram too much. Here we are also bringing in the payment form, which is this guy right here, this component, right? But we will get to that later. So first we focus on this guy right here. At the very beginning, we are declaring our big constant public key, and this public key we're getting from our Stripe account. This is the publishable key, and as you can see, it's a test key because I'm using the test data. Once we have this, we are declaring a variable called Stripe test promise, right? I mean, it's basically Stripe promise, but since it's test data, I just threw the test in there, just to remind me it's fake data. And we are providing that public key here to build this promise. And once this promise is in, we are declaring the primary function of this module, which is Stripe container. And here are our props that we are getting from the cart context. As I mentioned before, we're going to process it a little bit. For example, the total money is in irregular digits, right? But the way Stripe handles it is with cents. It doesn't handle dollars, right? So let's say if we have $1, then we multiply with 100 and make it into 100 cents, and declaring this variable total amount. So first variable we process is the total amount, right? And then we declare an empty array called line items. This is also another term that Stripe uses. So what we do, we take our cart items mapped through and prepare the new cart item according to Stripe's direction. Like now it is a product underscore ID quantity instead of just item.quantity, etc. So now this is also a new object we prepare according to Stripe. And once this is prepared, we just push those items into the line item empty array, right? We fill that up. So once we have our line items ready and the total amounts ready, that's where the React Stripe comes in with elements, and that's a pre-built element that Stripe gives us. So in here we just give it a prop called Stripe test promise, which is this guy right here, and this is where we call in our payment form component that we're about to build here. And in this component we're going to send our process data, like the total amount, the line items, and since the function doesn't need any processing, function goes directly. So that's pretty much explains the checkout page and the Stripe container. Next, we're going to cover the payment form. All right, time to cover this payment form. Just this block right here. All right, so let's go to the code. Okay, so this is our payment form. And as you can see, we're bringing in use state from React, use history from React Router DOM, Axios, because this is the first time we're going to make a call to our middleware from here. And we're bringing in HTTP service, and this time from service we are bringing in the set order function, where we actually create an order to the WooCommerce backend. We'll check it out later. And once again we're bringing in React Stripe module, from where we are collecting card elements, use Stripe, those two hooks and a component, as we mentioned before here, right? All right, so now at the very beginning we create a constant card options, where we just provide styling, the necessary styling. For example, in here, let's say if you put a wrong card information, it turns red, right? So things like that, see invalid card red. So these are all can be found in the Stripe documentation. And just as a quick reference, I'm just going to show you this. I mean, I'm going to make this URL available, and here there's lots and lots of examples and stuff to help you out if you want to dig deeper and customize more. But one thing I got to tell you, going down this road is not simple. You may get lost. I mean, that's mainly the reason I created this course. So if you want to further investigate, go through the documentation to get a better understanding. But if you want to get the job done, stick to this right here, all right? Because I have already done the research for you, and now I'm just showing you a finished product, all right? Okay, so that being done, now let's go look at the actual function, which is the payment form. And I mean, I'm just exporting the default right away. And then we are bringing in those props, the total amount, line items, clear card. These are all coming from our Stripe container, as we saw before. And at the very beginning, I'm using the history as a variable, using that use history hook. Then I am declaring a brand new variable success, and giving it a default state of false. And later on, we're going to be using set success to add data to it. And then another variable Stripe, the Stripe object, using these use Stripe hook, which we will use later in the file. And then element, this is another hook given to us by Stripe, use element, as we saw here. So we're just prepping these. And now before I continue, let's go all the way to the bottom, start from the form itself. That way it will be helpful. So in here, this is the main form, right? This is what we are returning. And as you can see, it's the just basic regular fields, input fields. Only thing to remember here, like their names, the name, email, address, city, state, zip, right? So that's how we're going to be pulling the data back in when we go up there. And at this point, at the very bottom, we are calling the card element component that we pulled out from the Stripe API. We're feeding that the card option as a prop. As you saw before at the top, this has a whole bunch of stylings, and especially something to remember here is that hide postal code. I specifically added this because what happens is, I mean, this is the actual card element, right? This is what we are getting from the Stripe API, using the Stripe React JS. This is the element part. In here, you normally add another zip code, a place for a zip code, right? Since I'm, using the zip code right here, I wanted to get rid of that, and this is how I'm getting rid of that, using hide postal code, because by default they don't show it in the documentation. You have to dig out a little bit to find this, right? So as we can say now, this card element is this guy right here, because we're controlling the styling and everything using this card options. And after that, our pay now button is nothing but a simple button, because at the very top, when we're declaring the form, here we are actually calling in on submit function, right? This is where the prop is on submit, and the function would be the handle submit, and we are sending the event, the basic JavaScript event, to this handle submit function. So now let's go see what this is doing. So right after the setup, we're calling in the handle submit function, and we're calling it as an async function because we're making multiple calls, like to the Stripe API, like here for a create payment method, and also we are making another call to our middleware here, which is also an async call. So we're using await here and await here. In order for us to use that, we're going to have to declare an async function, right? So we have to make sure we're careful about that. And in here, we're getting this JavaScript event. And at the very beginning, we are adding e.prevent default so that the page doesn't refresh as soon as we hit submit button, because that's the default behavior, and we're killing the default behavior this way. And right after that, this is the billing detail for Stripe, and this is a variable or an object we are declaring, and we are basically prepping the whole thing according to the Stripe API documentation. And in here, just the form below you saw, and that's why I told you to remember the names, and this is how we're getting the data from our inputs: e.target.name.value, e.target email.value, city, address, etc., etc., right? So now we have prepared this variable or object according to Stripe API, so that when we call this create payment method from the Stripe object, and as you saw, Stripe object is, basically Stripe hook is created right here. So Stripe.create payment method is gonna help us prepare that payment method. From here, we're just giving it a type card, with just a hard-coded thing. Documentation says that, and this card is just elements.getElement card element. So basically, this element, using this hook, we are bringing this card element in. These are all coming from the Stripe API, so not to worry about too much. And the billing details is just what we prepared using our input form, right? So now our payment method is ready. Once that is ready, here we are preparing our WooCommerce objects. When we create, and these are also being prepared according to the WooCommerce REST API. Here's one variable, WooCommerce order billing, and we are getting those same input values from the bottom and prepping it. And in case you're wondering how we are prepping it, is by this. And this is I'm going to make this URL available, and this is the documentation for creating orders, products, whatever, everything via the WooCommerce REST API. And in case you're wondering, like the billing and shipping address, how I knew what data points to use, this is how I knew. And overall, this is part of a larger object called data. The whole thing needs to be prepared accordingly, right? I mean, the line items, that's how WooCommerce knows what to put in this order. See, these are the line items, right? And also, shipping or whatever you want to put in. So this is the larger point. So, I mean, now that I'm here, I just wanted to quickly show you the products. I mean, on the previous videos, I've been bringing in like the listing all products, and this is the full URL. This is what it looks like, even though I was sending only this little part, products, right? And then, single product, and you probably remember, see, it's the product / the ID. See, this is how these are all built. And if you see here, you know that this is the part of URL we were providing before, right? So let's get back to the orders and create an order. And please notice this, they're actually telling you to create a post request, right? So now let's go back to our code. And here we saw how I prepared the billing and shipping address. And this is the actual data, the main data structure that where we're using this billing and shipping, we're using this larger object. And since I'm not, using, much about shipping, so I'm just keeping it at a flat rate and giving it a free shipping of $0. And also here, since I'm not using a phone input, so I'm just giving it a default, hard-coded phone number, so that at least WooCommerce is happy because all the data points are there. If you don't find any data points, just give them a string, empty string like that. That is also your choice. So now that our data for WooCommerce are prepared and our payment method for Stripe is ready, and this is when we make the call to our middleware. This guy right here. We're currently here. After prepping everything, we're making a request to our middleware. And we are first checking up on the error object, whether or not making sure there is no error, right? And how it is right here. See this error object and payment method, and payment method is now prepared with this data. So right here, from the payment method, we're just collecting the ID, deconstructing that ID, and after collecting the ID, we are making a post request via Axios to our middleware, which is running right here, listening on server port 4000. It's a completely separate one and using Node.js and Express. It has nothing to do with React, by the way. So now let's go back. And in here, it only asking for two properties, amount and ID. ID we collected from our payment method that we just built, and amount, we're providing the total amount which we collected up here via props from Stripe container, right? So now we are ready to create a payment. So once we make this request to our middleware and middleware returns, we check up on what it's returning. So if the return is response.data.success, then we print out on the console successful payment, and this is when we update our success variable by changing its value to true. As you notice up here, right here, success we declared, but we gave it a default value false. In here, once we know that payment went through successfully, we change our variable, and this is where we also make the request to WooCommerce to create an order. And our URL is orders, pretty much this guy right here, just orders, because the rest is taken care of by our HTTP service. And once we create our URL, we call in a set order function from our HTTP service and give it a URL and the data that we created right here, right? Now let's go look what it is doing at our HTTP service. So we have discussed all these in very great detail in our previous videos, so I'm not going to waste too much time here. But basically, we're using this WooCommerce REST API module to create a WooCommerce object, and in here through get data, we've been collecting our information, all the product information from the WooCommerce backend. But this is not what we're going to be using this time. We're going to be using this guy right here, set order, and the URL, and with the data we make that post request, and this is the post request. This is what WooCommerce is telling us. So this post request, once this is successful, we just print out order response, and order is successful, in our console log. If there is an error, we post the error, right? So now let's go back to the payment. So this is what's happening. Once the order is created, that's where we call the clear cart function. The clear cart function coming from all the way to the cart context and the cart reducer, right? So basically what it was doing is clearing the cart, removing everything from there, right? So it's just a simple function, and this is the one makes sure that after the transaction goes through, our cart is empty. And there's all sorts of error handling available here. If there's an error, we're going to see it in our consoles. So once this is done, our payment is made, our order is created at the WooCommerce backend, and our success variable is updated to true. So this is where we check for the success variable. If the success is false, then you show this original form, which is this guy right here. But if the success is true, that means our transaction went through. And in here, the else logic will take you straight to that success page, checkout success page, the one you saw earlier in this video. And now let's go check out what this success page looks like, which is extremely simple. Under the pages, the checkout page, and this is the main checkout page, and this is the success page. If you take a quick look, this is doing nothing at all. Pretty much it's just a static image, which is my hero image, is pulling in, and the rest are just layout components. And in here is just nothing but basic text in a different format and image, letting the customer know that transaction has gone through successfully. So there's not much to it. And after that being done, we are finished with our client side of the checkout. But one last thing I have to mention again is that once we go back to payment, and something to remember, which is very important, before we set the order request to our WooCommerce, for this to succeed, we have to get our WordPress backend ready with this function right here. This function must be present in the functions file of your WordPress site in order for your request to succeed. Now we have gone through our checkout page, Stripe container, and payment method, and WooCom order, pretty much the whole process on the client side. Next, we're going to be quickly going through our middleware. So let's go check it out. All right, so time to go through our middleware. Server is listening on port 4000. So let's look at the code. This is what we are seeing right now. Server is listening on port 4000. Now this is mostly boilerplate code. I mean, you can find it in so many places, including the Stripe documentation, and there are lots and lots of YouTube videos on how to build this. So I'm just going to quickly go over this. It helped me a little bit because I knew Express and Node.js, how to work with them. But I believe it is not really always necessary that you have to know every single one of them. But to just pull this off, you can probably just straight out type this thing and it will work, right? So what's happening here is, whole thing is using Node.js, and then I'm bringing in a Express module to create the actual server. And in here, I'm also requiring the Stripe module. And there are a few things like body parser and cores. And cores helps with what you saw before, the cross-site issues. And main part is here, which is basically, it is getting it ready. This is where we are creating the payment endpoint, where we posted the data in our previous request right here. As you can see, Axios post, and this is our URL, and this is the endpoint payment. So once you prepare it, and you tell it what to look for. And remember, we send out two things, amount and ID, as here, amount and ID in our payment form. And here we're creating a payment variable using the Stripe payment intents.create, and we're just giving it the amount, and the rest just hand filling them. Payment method ID, we're providing this ID, and confirmation true. And once this is done, we're console logging the payment, and that's what you were seeing here. Right here, all the details is coming from there. And if it was successful, it is also saying the success as true, payment successful, giving it a message. And if there is any error, it was going to show through this catch method. And after all that, we're just turning on the server with app.listen and giving it a default port of 4000. And thus, this guy is telling you server is listening on or port 4000, and once we make our request, it takes it, sends it to Stripe, and then gets a return back and lets us know the payment being successful right here. And thus we see all our payments right here in our Stripe account. And this concludes our application walkthrough of this very application built with WooCommerce and React. Please hit the like button if you liked it, and please don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please smash the like button and the subscribe button. This will help me bring more free contents like this to you every week. Thanks again.